here's what it comes down to me. If I watch an American goalkeeper deal with a shot-stopping situation where he's diving at the ball with his feet, we've totally missed the idea that we come from a handball-oriented culture. We turned a lot of that into what we used to call indoor goalkeeping skills to the outdoor game. And I think we've lost range. I think we've lost the ability to make better saves because the body position when players are under stress and the goals that are given up, when we abandon some of those core technical pieces, how the feet move, how the body has to be probably more still, all of that. I think we've lost the plot there.
Welcome to Taking Your Shot, the pathway to soccer success, presented by Maverick Goalkeeper Academy and the Rising Star College Bound program.
Welcome to Taking Your Shot, the pathway to soccer success. Our guest on today's podcast is Rob Walker. Rob is currently the men's head soccer coach at St. Martin's University in Lacey, Washington. Rob has coached youth soccer, high school soccer, ODP, U.S. Youth National Team, U.S. Full National Teams. He's worked with players of all ages and ability levels all over the world. He's helped start college soccer programs for men's and women's soccer. He's been a director of coaching. He's written numerous articles for all kinds of soccer publications, including Soccer Journal and Soccer America. Rob has coached goalkeepers such as Kasey Keller, Tom Dutra, Chris Islander, and many, many more over the years. He has a wealth of knowledge and experience, expertise in writing coaching curriculums, helping coaches through their coaching education process. Rob also helped write and found the first U.S. soccer national goalkeeping license. Rob Walker is also part of a coaching tree of coaches that come from the Pacific Northwest and had a heavy influence on my playing and coaching career. Without further ado, let's jump into the podcast with our guest, Rob Walker. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. Just kind of part of this podcast is really explaining like kind of your soccer journey, and you've been in the game for so long. There's so many different things we could chase with you, and hopefully you have a good experience today and you'll come back and talk to us some more in the future. Could you tell us a little bit about your early experiences with soccer, how you got into coaching, and just kind of bring us some information about just what got you involved and what's led you to where you're at today?
My first experience with soccer was in a small town off the Columbia River in Goldendale, Washington, when I was about 6 years old. And I lived in a neighborhood with all older kids. So they'd stick a helmet on me and beat the crap out of me playing football. I learned how to swear because that's what they did. And a PE teacher had come in and introduced soccer into the high schools. So it trickled down because we played all kinds of street games. This was in the late 60s, mid 60s. I don't know. This is a long time ago now. But anyway, that was my first experience with soccer. And you get in and I got knocked around and learned how to swear some more, and because the game's like that. And so that was my first experience. When I was in high school, I was playing a little bit, but I was doing some other stuff, and my sister's team needed a coach. So my parents told me I didn't have to work one summer if I coached the team because they had a summer league. And so that was my first experience in coaching. And I went and I started my licensing, went and took my 9-hour F course and my E course and all that, and got tuned up. And I think when I was in college, I went to get my National C license, and so then things started to pick up. Unfortunately, as a player, competitive soccer, select soccer probably missed me by a little bit. It's just hard to believe that where the game's gone now with people working full time and kids are full time in soccer and everything else. That didn't exist for me, but it's something that I've been able to be a part of as a coach, so it's been fun. So I've just kind of taken opportunities here and there, and just tried to get out and work. And I've had the opportunity to have done coaching education, and I've worked with great mentors. Bobby Howe at Washington Youth Soccer before he went to U.S. Soccer. Tony Waiters I got to work a lot with him, and I miss him a lot.
Oh, man.
Peter Meller down in Florida, Gwyn Williams, Phil Wedden, those are goalkeeping guys, but also in Washington, in 2000, I went to Alabama to work in my first full-time gig as a director of coaching down there. And I left a staff in Washington of like 26 A-licensed coaches. So
Wow.
just, being around a group of people that, were, coaching because they loved the game and they wanted to, help players grow. That's really where I've come from. So, that's kind of my story.
Wow.
So I've seen the game change financially over the last, 30, 40 years. My dad coached for 25 years and he spent way more money than I'll probably ever make, just to volunteer coaching. What kind of kept you in the game? What kind of led you, during those times where, you probably weren't making a lot of money and you're going to college? What kind of kept your hooks and inspired you to keep down this path?
Well, I think that, when you find people that like doing what they do, that's a big part of it. We're lucky to, I could very well have a different kind of an occupation. I was an English teacher and left teaching for full-time soccer. So I guess that the value orientation of being able to work with players, no matter what the age, has always been kind of a driving force in not making me, but I've chosen to be a part of a kind of a process in my own local area and put time into it and try to improve myself and improve players, and that's the dance right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know of you. When I was a younger player, I've gotten to see you, and I was really fortunate to work with you at a camp up in Seattle once, which I will never forget your spirit. Like, you have such a positive way about how you approach it. It just seems like you love to be out there. And, where do you think, like, but there's so many different, we observe as coaches in all of our experiences with soccer, like so many different angles to come at this from. Like, where do you think that comes from? How do you keep that energy going? And I know this also takes a lot out of us. I don't want to assume too much, but it's a challenging job to be a coach, and you're coaching you're coaching at college, and you've coached at all the different levels. How do you do that? Like, how do you keep that going for all these years? What's your secret?
Well, I've been married a long time too, and it's all about love. Pelé was right. It's all about love. And when you love what you're doing, and you love the passion that brings out. And I'm not necessarily, there are some things that I do that make me look like I'm an extrovert, but I'm quite happy not to be. Actually, I'm pretty introverted, sorry. And so, there was a time when you got to be on and you got to do that, but then, you got to bring that to the table. To say that I have a positive spirit, there are some players that I know that I probably, have jarred them into a different life with some of the things I've said and done with them. But, that's all about the passion and all about, having a spirit that, is about, trying to constantly improve. And, it's a fun process, but it is a demanding process. And, I expect my players to want to go along for the ride. So, it's kind of a roundabout way of saying, guys, that, if you want to go for it, it's there. You just have to embrace it. This I don't know if you can see this picture. This is it's a sculpture down in Chico. And, I actually took this one picture about 12 years ago, and we went back, got pasted down at Chico State this year, but I took the guys in there, and we took a team picture in it as well. But, the whole point is that, I got a long arm span. I go about 6'4" across. And I'm willing to put my arms around my players, my team, my school, my club, whatever, and hold my arms around it and help, drive us forward. And that's kind of what it is for me. So that's your metaphor for the day right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to mention at some point, I do remember, if it's okay for me to say, you mentioned and showed me you have freakishly long arms. when you're standing normal, like full stance, your hands go past your knees, right? When you're
Hey, the picture behind me doesn't lie.
No.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. When God put me together, just went to the auto parts store, ran out of some pieces, was pretty happy.
Yeah.
The biggest disappointment of my life was when I was in 8th grade. I haven't grown an inch since then. And I wanted to be 6'4". That was my dream, but didn't happen.
Well, Rob, maybe one day we'll get some we'll get some platforms your way from back in the day, and so you can feel it.
Won't matter. I have no hops, so
yeah, right. Well, Kris is a goalkeeper. Kris has devoted his whole life to goalkeeping. He's coaching, but his goalkeeping. He's probably not going to brag on himself too hard, but he was in the national team pool. Like he is very experienced. Kris and I were talking about having you on, and obviously we're excited to talk to you in general, but also in your goalkeeping background. So Kris, kind of putting back on you, let's go down the goalkeeping route a little bit. What do you think? You got any questions here to throw out to Rob?
Yeah, actually it brings me to my next question for Rob. One of my mentors and good friends, Franz Hook, he said that goalkeeping took me to the top. Kind of the sense that he never had the aspiration per se to be a head coach, because he just let goalkeeping kind of drive him. And somebody as accomplished as you, Rob, you've done it all. You've coached boys, girls, college, the Olympic team. You've been a national coach, youth coach, and on the full circuit. What has kind of led you in your career? What it was early, and me still, forming mine and always taking the next thing. When you left teaching to be a director, what was your goal as a coach? And then how did that change over time? Because I always try to mentor still the people that are under me, is set your goal, but be open to the different pathways to get there, kind of a thing, because there's no one direct route.
No, I think the first thing is that in terms of goalkeeping, finding those relationships with individuals that want to improve is probably the path to success. The biggest problem and I'm gonna editorialize, guys, but the biggest problem I see is that there are a lot of kids that don't show up for their club goalkeeping training.
Yeah.
And they work with a separate goalkeeper trainer. They're disconnected from the ethos, the curricular drive of the club, whether that's well planned or not. They're not connected, and they just plain don't. Their commitment only goes so far. So if you want to be on a successful pathway, having as a coach or as a goalkeeper, having the wherewithal to want a regular commitment with people that will provide feedback and energy and opportunities is huge. And I see that as a real difference between the goalkeepers that rise and the goalkeepers that don't, because you cannot do it and still be okay. You can not want that to do the extra work, and you can be okay. And okay may mean you still get to play. In youth soccer, it probably does, because you're paying for that opportunity. We don't sit kids that don't go to club goalkeeping training. We just play them because of the ramifications if we don't. So that is a real deal. I mean, if I think about my relationships with the best goalkeepers, I'll name drop here a little bit. Kasey Keller, from when he was 11 and a half, he'd call me. Okay. Hey, can we work out? Yeah. Tom Dutra at the Sounders. Same thing. Yeah. I mean, Rob, Can we go work out? Yeah. Matt Olson, who's, played at Indiana and Wake Forest and had a little stint, as a backup in MLS. Same thing. Michelle Voiland, who's head coach at Whitman. She was up from Washington. Same thing. Zach Lubin, who played for me at St. Martin's, was my first goalkeeper, when we started our program. After he graduated, hey, I'm coming into town or whatever. I want to train. Can we get together? So that if I take a look, Remy Roy, who basically is the head of scouting, and player personnel at the New England Revs down in Mobile. When I lived in Birmingham, he used to come up and train when he was still playing. And none of this came from me. It's all came from them. So, as a coach, that's what I'm looking for. That's the secret.
Yeah.
That
that's
is it.
That and isn't that, what do you think makes that so rare? Because it's just, there's levels within levels, right? And you've seen it at all the levels. So what are some of those differentiating elements? And we do have folks that watch this that are soccer parents and kids that are training and really want to pursue this. What are those little details that you see it? Because that's a common thread amongst all those people. Mm-hmm. But what were there little things in between there, and what do you think separates that decision-making process from others?
Well, in my lifetime, I had, you see those memes on Instagram and Facebook, especially, when I was a kid, we threw rocks, for fun. That was our idea of gaming, right? I mean, I don't want to get into it too much, but there's a fair amount of truth to that. The amount of time that you spent either playing or when you get a little older and you decide that you need to do the work, that's something that the best players, and I can take into account my best outfield players in college, are the ones that come out and work on their own, or the work with another player, work with our assistant or whatever, to do the extra work. And that's one of the reasons that they're special. Is they've been born with something, but then they want to fine tune it. And one of the things that in our soccer culture, when you pay, you're not necessarily fine tuning everything. You're getting an opportunity to be in a symphony, but without really being required to play an instrument or play it well. And that's the thing. If I say, hey, I'm going to give so much of my time and you can show up and train. And I say that to 100 kids. The output is, I could be lonely waiting for kids to show up for that extra opportunity. So, it takes a little bit of specialness, and it takes, that's part of chasing the dream. But when somebody says they want to be a pro, the first question I ask them is, how much time outside of the structured schedule that you have are you willing to put into your game? So, yeah, that's a big thing. So if I was and oftentimes when I talk to like middle school kids about what it takes to play collegiately, the first question I ask them is, how far can you play the ball with your weak foot in the air? Can you bring the ball down out of the air with your weak foot, for example? Just and if you can't, why not? Or when a recruit tells me that they're ambidextrous, well, that ambidextrous for that kid and for my expectations has two different definitions usually. So, and I remind them of that at some point. It's like, are we really there? So, yeah. So that to me, that's one of the biggest thing. I think also, being committed. I was talking to some other guys a while back about this. I mean, when we talk about how the game for goalkeeper, we're just talking about goalkeeping. And you take a look at games that were played from Christmas on. You don't even have to go to the World Cup. You got David De Gea, having a ball go through his legs at the near post, and then there's a conversation, that he's having with a teammate about how to deal with that. I mean, part of the reason that you go out to practice is you should have some things that you do all the time to be effective. And games existed for a long time, since the late 1800s, and being able to deal with those kind of situations is important. But when we start to say, well, the goalkeeper uses their feet 80% of their time, okay, that's cool, that's important, and that is part of the modern game. And then we make changes. Now there's the back pass rule in 91, and now we goal kicks don't have to leave the area. Oh, now we're being pressed. That's causing the goalkeeper more problems. So yeah, we got to keep working with the feet. But the fact that footwork that gets the body the ball has become such a difficult thing. You have the goal given up at Chelsea last week. Should that have been a save? Why was he on his knees? Well, that's all about some basic things that somebody's leaving out of the equation, because that stuff can all be trained. And that's one of the things now, as I'm the rhyme of the ancient mariner out working with these younger guys, I'll say there are some things that I'm not going to ask you to change, but when you do some basic things, you're going to look, if I do my job right, you're going to be effective at these things. And, when you take a look at Kasey, he looked a lot like Tom Dutra, who looked a lot like Zach Lubin, blah, 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 on and on. The guys that I have, usually, if they're going to make the save, they look the same. We're not cutting corners on some of those important things. And that has to go into the regular practice, either in the team structure, in the individual goalkeeping they're doing, or what they're doing on their own, or whatever. All that stuff has to happen. So that's a really big piece for me, if you want to talk about how to get better. And that's part of the journey. That's part of what makes training special. There's that moment when I'm out working with a player, and you can hear traffic going by the field in the background, you can hear a bird flying by, but then there's that kind of silence and that focus, and when that performance picks up. And to me, that's what's special, especially about working with goalkeepers. But outfield players, I find those same moments, and that's kind of as I get older, I'm searching for those moments, because then you are in a real performance zone there.
Yeah.
That's critical.
And you were a part of designing U.S. Soccer's first goalkeeper curriculum, correct?
Yeah.
How do you break that down? So the differences of working with youth, 12, 13-year-olds, and then pros at the national level.
Well, I think that one of the issues that we had when we designed that course is that USYS had come out with their own kind of expectations about goalkeeping. And so basically, I would say that curriculum was designed for under 14s, under 16s, and up, in terms of some of the topical areas that we were covering. And it didn't have so much to do with the adoptions of the small-sided games, because that was actually they've changed those ramifications since that first curricular piece came out. So there's no worry about, we never talked about build outlines and how to teach playing out of the back or anything like that when we did the course. So it was all based for more older senior youth and above 11v11.
Okay.
So, but if I was to go back and reframe it, I would say that we also needed a course for beginning goalkeeping that would probably do a better job of getting meshed into where our expectations for senior youth and higher goalkeeping is. I think that's a missing piece of the puzzle, because it doesn't exist in my mind.
I know in U.S. soccer it doesn't exist. Any insight by you on when they might release that? I know right now you have to have a B license or higher to take the goalkeeping license, and I think that's an area a lot of club coaches want to know more about. Even
Yeah.
if they don't want to be goalkeeper coaches, they just want to know how to give their goalkeepers something, during the games.
Yeah. I think that, there's been 3 or 4 different generations in coaching education through U.S. soccer since, because I haven't done a course in, probably 2012, 2013. So now all of a sudden it's 10 years ago, but I have worked with United Soccer coaches.
Okay.
And I think that there is an avenue there. That there is an educational arm there where information can be given. I think there is a correlation, quite frankly, between what's going on in goalkeeping in the United States and with our U.S. keepers that are abroad. I think there can be a comparison to this current generation and the previous one. I think that there's a difference in values, probably. I don't know enough of the new guys well enough to know, but I think that there were more similarities between that first cadre of guys that, went across and, in one form or another, had quite a bit of success and longevity. And, I think that I just think that we need to address this. I think here's what it comes down to me. If I watch an American goalkeeper deal with a shot stopping situation where he's diving at the ball with his feet, we've totally missed the idea that we come from a handball oriented culture. Now, handball, and I don't mean about team handball, but I mean baseball, basketball, hand-eye coordination, athletic kind of movements, between, what goes on up here and the movements of the body and the hands, right? I don't believe that we use our hands like we used to, and that was very much a part of the first generation of the goalkeeping license. Is that there were some pretty simple principles that I think some people kind of thought were too simplistic, but it explains. If I just go back over the holiday period and take a look at goals given up, and I apply those older principles, I think that we've lost some value there. So, and,
I agree.
And,
yeah.
And I may not be right, but having done the dance, I'm allowed now. As I get older, because I used to be pretty opinionated and probably piss some people off, quite frankly. So I don't try to be as strong in my opinions now, but since I'm on a podcast and we're talking about goalkeeping, I'll say that I think that there are some, the whole thing about the crazy Yvonne, the starfish thing coming out off the line and everything. And, we don't stalk with our hands as much as we used to. And we look like we're making, we've turned a lot of that into what we used to call indoor goalkeeping skills to the outdoor game. And I think we've lost range. I think we've lost the ability to make better saves. Because the body position when players are under stress and the goals that are given up, when we abandon some of those core technical pieces, how the feet move, how the body has to be probably more still, all of that. I think we've lost the plot there. So
I agree with you, Rob, and I'll put myself out there with you as well. And everybody that knows me knows my strong opinions on it. But I think I like what you said, abandoned those foundational techniques, because and I try to do goalkeeping pragmatically. What's the biggest advantage of a goalkeeper? They can use their hands. It's the only person. Do you catch better with your feet or your hands? Your hands. The only way you can make a save with your feet is by leaning backwards. So you're not going to get any kind of push off or range. You limit the amount your body can cover in the goal. For me right there, that's the reason. Now, is it easier to use your feet? Yeah, that's your body's natural reaction to lean backwards. But we should be teaching the kids at the youngest age group, not what's easy, but what's going to give them the best opportunity to save goals. And that's what it's about, right? Is, you know, the goalkeeper's influence is, you ask any coach, it's about saving the ball, keeping it out of the net. You ask Franz, he's trying to change the term goalkeeper to goal player, because their influence is really with the feet versus actually saving it. But at the end of the day, here in America, where we're at right now, is they're still the keeper, and we have to make the best save. And when we're teaching them to use the feet, because ultimately that's what the goalkeeper coach is going to think is going to happen, we're, in my opinion, crippling those players. And like you said, I don't think I'm right. If there's one way to do it, we'd all do it the same way. So I'm not saying this is the only way. There's you know, practicality for those saves, no doubt, but it's not the best way. We lose our number one advantage that way as a keeper.
Yeah, I think the idea about incorporating the goalkeeper so they are a player, I think that's a really fine approach, and that's, you know, that's part of my evolution as a coach, is to always make sure when we do integration topics that's key. It's just that fundamentally, you know, when you get signed to a glove contract and you don't use them correctly, you should have to give your money back. You
Fair
know?
point.
Or just wear a pair of size 11s, you know, studs on your hands. And, you know, get it out there. You know, so yeah, I think that there's a fair point to saying we got to be good with our feet and all that. And that's been the exciting thing about changes in laws and changes in approaches in getting teams to play out of the back, and, you know, all of that. The problem that we have with that is that because we're getting results with really young players, kids are self-selecting not to want to be in that position.
Yeah.
I mean, just if you went back to say 1985 and said, how many kids in a club will we be able to take and train in goal, say at under 13? Those numbers were higher then than they are now. Because, you know, when kids are 10 and 11 and they're giving up goals just because that's part of the game, right? I mean, you know, they can't reach the crossbar, all that. Or it's their techniques that they haven't mastered yet. I mean, all those things, right? You know, we're losing a pool of players that we have. So I'm all for getting kids to be good soccer players and then to envelope that into the goalkeeping position. But at the end of the day, when you're at the near post, that's a goalkeeping situation, and it has nothing to do with being an attack. You only have to take one kick off a game. You know, and do we want to give up corners instead of, you know, being able to have a good touch and keep the ball in play and keep the ball? You know, I mean, you know, so for all those coaches out there that are letting that go when, you know, goalkeepers, you know, pushed a ball wide when they could have held it or whatever, you know, those qualities of possession apply to the goalkeeper, but they're hand oriented instead of being foot oriented.
Yeah. Now, is that something that you look for in your goalkeepers when recruiting them at the college level?
Well, at the college level, for me, I coach at probably one of the smallest schools in Division II in the West. We have 1,200 kids, 1,260 undergrads at St. Martin's. So my sample size of recruits, because it's a little bit different than going to a small school where I have certain academic expectations, everything else. I mean, it's the attributes of the goalkeeper. Number one, they better be able to get above a 3-point. So that's part of it. You know, I mean, so they may not be 6'4". They may be 5'9.5" or 5'10". So some things start to change. The big question that I have with my goalkeepers is, all right, we're going to take you through some things. We're going to come up with a reasonable sort of understanding of what it is we want you to do. And we'll train for certain things that Rob wants, but then I don't want to take anything that you do naturally away. And so that's part of I wouldn't call it a negotiation, but it is actually. I mean, it's just a realization of strengths and weaknesses. And then it's my job, because I do the goalkeeping as well as being the head coach, which is I'll just quickly say, I'll say to my goalkeepers, all right, right now the goalkeeping coach is talking to you. Okay. Because right now the head coach doesn't want to mess with this.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So the goalkeeping coach is dealing with you. Now what'll happen is the goalkeeping coach will go talk to the head coach about what we're talking about here, because maybe it's an issue, and so they kind of get it. But then, like in an 11-a-side or something, we have an issue, and I scream at him or something. Then I'll walk up and go, "Oh, you just talked to the head coach, just so you know." So there's a real balance there in terms of how all that works. But what I look for, I mean, see, not everybody, none of the goalkeepers that I have, unless they played club soccer for me, which I've had one or two guys that have played club soccer for me, has the technical experience that I expect at a collegiate level. So that's part of the orientation, when they first arrive is, what can we do to get their bodies moving in a way that'll help them be really effective with their, just basic shot stopping, catching, diving, movement to the ball, movement coming out off the line, dealing with crosses, all that. And for me, it's all footwork based. Like I don't use speed ladders or hurdles or anything in goalkeeping training, because I don't feel those steps match what they need to do in goal. However, I do use them with them in the gym.
Yeah. Game realism.
To get just to help core movement pieces. I'll use them in the gym, but as soon as we're out on the field, because a goalkeeper's step is typically shorter than what it takes you to be successful in a speed ladder, for example. Okay. And I don't want them to pick their feet up as high when they go over a banana hurdle, for example. So I don't use those in training. So that's just me, but that's it. Yeah. So I just kind of, what I look for, like I've recruited a goalkeeper coming in that dives backwards. Oh. Okay. So I know I can fix that, but I don't know if I can fix it with this guy. So that'll mean playing time or not.
Yeah, you got a project. And Jason and I do a lot of the college recruiting stuff. We mentor a lot of young people. Right. And when my kids ask me, I tell them straight up, honestly, look, I'm going to be a little bit more critical and I'm going to give you things to improve on, but it depends who's watching you. Right. Yeah. Because that may not be a problem with someone else, but if you're not catching the ball, you're pushing it when you should be catching. That's a problem for me. And I may not recruit you because I don't want to spend time doing that as your coach. Whereas another coach, that might not be a problem, and it may be a better school. I'm not going to say I coach at, the best school in the nation or anything, but we're very good and we have, expectations of what we're looking for. So, that's where we're at. So you got to kind of cater and you got to be very well-rounded.
Yeah, that's where when you're coaching for God, you got to take in all the children. Yeah. So that's where my Benedictine values come in. Hospitality is a huge Benedictine value. Mm. So that's where these long arms come in, put my arms around them, and it's Robbo says all the way. So.
And it's worked out for you. You got a GNAC national championship, I believe, right?
Yeah, that was a long time ago now, man. That was when I didn't have gray hair. Yeah. Different time, different level of scholarship money, to be fair. So just got to, I mean, that's why I can't be, I mean, if I get a kid that wants to come in and work, I'll take him. That's where I'm at right now, to be fair. Yeah.
So how does a athlete get your attention if they're interested in the school? What are things that you look for? How could they get on your radar?
Well, I think the first thing is that I don't like to be contacted by mom, dad, or a recruiting service, because I'll never coach any of those individuals ever. So I like players to figure out how to put and remembering that I'm an English major, put together, a short note that explains a little bit about themselves. it's always best when they do their research, but like, I love it. Like a kid sent me a thing and said, "Oh, I saw your record was 2 something, whatever our record was last year. I know I can help you do better." And I said, "Oh, give me $100 and we'll see," so, doing your research has some limits, and you have to have some tact in how you say that. But, I mean,
and you prefer that honesty.
Well, yeah. I mean, but what I look for players that can do something well.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a coach that I worked with when I started at St. Martin's, and he was in my club, and he used to talk about how well-rounded players need to be to go to college. And I said, if they're playing for me, they're not well-rounded. If they were well-rounded, they'd be in an MLS. College players are not well-rounded. From the 4 pillars of the game. I mean, they have weaknesses in their technical play. They have weaknesses in what they can do tactically. There are very few players, that maybe they're technically strong, but psychologically not. Mm-hmm. And so then they're not technically strong when they need to be, because they're not strong here. So I look for something that they can do, and then it's about encourage them to grow in the areas that they're weak. So, that's what it's all about. And that's where I have players that sneak out and, they go to somebody's tryout, and they go through a tryout process, and then they're held, and maybe they get signed, after they graduate, so I got a few of those guys around. I know for sure that anybody that's ever played for me, when they go out into in the world of life, I like their chances, because we get our butt kicked at St. I mean, our strength of schedule is always. I mean, we played national champions last year. Our first game, I think it was 4-0 at halftime. I think it ended up 7. Cal State LA, very good team. And people say, well, why don't you play somebody that you can beat? Well, you don't go to St. Martin's, 1,200 kids, to play the easy schools. You go to challenge and test yourself, and you go when you're challenged off the field academically. You do a good job, and you can go anywhere in the world. Then you can do anything, but it's that process that you have to go through to get there. I mean, we had games this year, leading regionally ranked teams, at halftime. And lose. Well, why? Well, we just got to get better. I mean, we got to clear a ball. We got to do this. We got to do that. I mean, every day coming in, we still have to address our weaknesses. But are we strong enough to be competitive? Yeah. Now the next step is not just to be competitive, but to get results. Because that's what, when these guys go to work for bosses, they're going to have some results. So, going about and having that, that kind of pressure cooker as a collegian is somewhat helpful in that respect. So I'm looking for kids that want that challenge.
Yeah.
And if they don't know, that's why they may, only 4.5% of varsity men soccer players, boys soccer players, can make it at NCAA Division 1, 2, or 3. Yeah. And out of that 4.5%, not all of them stay. Look at the portal. Oh, I'm not happy. I'm going to go somewhere else. So when I recruit kids, I'm saying, I don't want you to go to the portal. I want you to prepare yourself to be here for 4 years, so we can take a big chunk of a challenge, chew it up, digest it, and then when you move on, you can do something that powers you to go forward.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a mentality, right? It's like, what can sports do for you, right? Beyond, and that's a big theme. And I know Kris and I talk about that a lot, and it's important to us because that's what happened in our lives. Is there's so much more from this opportunity than just what you see, right? You think it's just about the game, but it's really about everything else. I mean, that's a powerful approach that you have that I think is important.
Yeah. Well, what's really cool is when you start talking to guys that graduated 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And number one is they miss it. They miss it. I don't know if they miss me so much, but they miss each other. they miss the stuff that we get, that we got to do. I love all my guys, but definitely we sometimes get on a rocky beach and have to figure out how to get to the sand. And sometimes I force them onto the rocks, to be honest, because that's a necessary part of their development. And so, if they trust me enough to do that, that's it. So I have to have, I've been thinking about, if I was at a different school, how would I recruit? And I would go for more stars, to use that football mentality, always a 5-star, 4-star, 3 stars. I mean, I don't look at the stars on the kids that I get. I look at them, as having something that they can give us, the interest of coming to a small school, and then the willingness to go through the process with us all. Is that I have a different kind of recruiting philosophy than if I was at a state institution or, a school with different resources, that kind of thing, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Wow.
For sure.
So maybe a little shifting gears slightly, but, and more to speak a little bit about your, maybe some behind the scenes or some information you could share with us about Kasey Keller specifically. 98 Gold Cup semifinal. We beat Brazil. Was it Romario who said that's the greatest game he's ever seen from a goalkeeper that he's ever played against? Can you tell us a little bit about that, having such a close relationship, obviously?
Well, I had 2 different relationships with Kasey. I started working with him when he was 11 and a half. And ultimately, his mom got a divorce, and ultimately I ended up marrying her. So I have the family side of Kasey, and then I have the goalkeeping side of Kasey. And to be honest with you, we tried to keep that separate, because it just, the dynamics of everything is just too convoluted when you start to put together. Like, if people say, "Oh, you trained your son," or if they say to Kasey, "Oh, your dad trained you," that's not true at all. I mean, I'm nothing. You would never call me his father. Just for a lot of my age and our age difference is not as much as it would normally be there. So, because mom's older than me, so there's that whole dynamic. Is just it's different. I was talking to a guy today. He went to Qatar and he got to sit with a family group, got tickets with a family group, and that was really cool for him. And I said, yeah, I got to do that in Italy and in France. But you keep your mouth shut, because as a coach, you got to keep that stuff separate. And that's the big thing. And I think that, based on the current soap opera that is around everything with the men's national team, I think there's a reason why you keep that separate, and you just do that. And I have no other opinion about it other than that. So, because I'm fond of everybody in that group. So anyway, that's what I learned. That's it. Now on the goalkeeping side of working with Kasey, the thing that he had to work on the most as a youth goalkeeper, from the time I started working with him, and then they didn't have as many national teams and national camps. I mean, they only had 2 ODP age groups when Kasey was playing.
Oh, wow.
So, and there was no academy. There was. And that was back when ODP was different than the FIFA year. So you were basically a half year. So like he was under 15 and a half, 16 and a half, 17 and a half. And I think under 19 finally were the age groups that we had. But there were only, at the beginning, there were only 2 national teams. So the hardest thing for him is just not having him be in a crisis moment when he couldn't make a save he wanted to save, but really had no chance in saving it. And I really credit Bill Irwin at the University of Portland, who worked with him, every day, for helping him understand that no matter what you do, sometimes you're still going to give up goals, and you can't let that, you can't lose your mind over that stuff. You can be pissed that you make if you make a mistake or whatever, but you've got to start really understanding what the percentages are when you go to make a save and what happens. And should that have been 100%? Should that have been you have an 80% chance of making the save? I mean, you kind of start to figure that out as you grow and develop as you get older. So that was one of the biggest things. Because I mean, when he was younger, you could chip the ball over him and laugh at him, and he'd get all pissed off and everything. And so we had to kind of grow through that and work on that. So that's a major thing. The other thing for him is that he came from a time when, there was the 4-step rule and you could put the ball down and pick it up again. Now, how stupid is it for me to say that in 2023? What?
Yeah.
What? But, go ahead and Google, Peter Shilton, in the 1990 World Cup. I mean, he gives up a goal against Italy by putting the ball down at the wrong time and trying to pick it back up again. I mean, so, that's where we're at, I mean,
Yeah.
So dealing with using his feet was something that he had to work on a lot, and just working on his touch and everything else. Because when he was when he played on a good club team, he didn't take the goal kicks on his team. Somebody else came and took him, and nobody played out of the back, by the way. I mean, everything
Right.
was artillery launches,
Yeah, flick-ons and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Playing 4-4-2 with a sweeper stopper and all that fun stuff. So becoming, when he was a pro, like at Spurs, they did a thing where I think Hans Seegers was the goalkeeping coach there. And they played a lot of soccer tennis, and Kasey became the best soccer tennis player of the goalkeeping corps there. So he didn't lose.
Yeah.
And that's critical. He also did something else that was helpful to his maturation. They used to play, I think on Thursdays before a Saturday game, they play 11v11, and he always played on the B side. And this is when he was the number one. So, and the thing is that he organized the B side not to lose to the A side.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty strong piece, because a lot of times, coaches say, no, I want you with the starting 11 and everything. But, Kasey said, I just remember for a great part of the season, I mean, there were weeks in a row where the A side couldn't beat the B side in these 11 sides.
Yeah.
And so that's what you want. Here's another little one. When he came home from Millwall the first year, the really cool thing about him is that typically when he'd come back from being abroad, he'd take a few weeks off. They'd go on vacation. He'd play some golf, all that, and then he'd have a timetable set up before he went back. And usually there was also national team commitments then too, because for the most part in the 90s he played with the national team. 94 he didn't. He wasn't a part of that group, but in other years, he there was be a national team deal. But that gave us maybe in between 5 and 8 training sessions before he went back for preseason, because they wouldn't. The great thing about coming home and then going with the national team is he didn't have to do the grunt work. He didn't have to swim and go on the long runs and stuff for preseason. So we thought it was a pretty good deal then, just to negotiate with me how many training sessions he'd want. So anyway, with that in mind, we're going to this is his first year, and he goes, so how's it feel to be working out with a pro? And I go, all right. I said, all right. So anyway, the problem is that when, if you're not training right and everything, some things can go wrong. And so he wasn't moving over enough for his near post goals. I rattled a bunch of goals from outside the 18 on him, and he was livid and everything else. And so I said, so Case, how's it feel to be playing with a pro? And I pointed at myself,
Yeah.
and then the thing is that just with some adjustments and, coming across in the right way and being in the right place, couldn't score on him at all. And that's the way he was at University of Portland. Bill would say, my leg's falling off. I can't score on him, that kind of stuff. And that goes back to that desire to want to train on your own and get to a certain point and then carry that forward into what you're doing with the team and everything else. That's that value we were talking about earlier. So those are probably three of the best Kasey stories to tell. I think too, when he got older, there was a guy, Chris Islander, who was the USL Sounders #1. And Kris is a pretty good story too. Yeah. His dad called me like he was like 13 years old, and I was doing this Saturday morning training thing in the 90s, and doing some work. This would have been the later night part of the 90s. And so his dad, called and said, "Hey, I heard you're doing some goalkeeping training, and I got a son." And I said, "How old is he?" "Oh, 13. I go, "Oh, I don't know how this is going to go." And so we brought him in, and guys like Tom Dutra, when he was back from, getting ready for, whatever, he'd jump into training sessions. Matt Olson, guys that were going to go on to college. I mean, I had, 4 or 5 guys that were rotating into this kind of thing all the time. And it was like $25, train every week. So, I mean, I was making no money, but that was good. I mean, it was it. And sometimes I'd say, if you can do this, I'll give you your $25 back. So, I was bartering as well. So anyway, Chris Islander goes through this, and then I moved to Alabama, and Tom Dutra came in, and he was done playing then, and he trained Kris up through the end of his youth career. Kris went on to the University of Washington, and then played for the Sounders for a few years, and then in 2009 he was the third guy. He was the third string goalkeeper in 2009 when they first started. But anyway, Kris was probably, 16 or so. I was home during the summertime or something, and Kasey came in to train, and I had him train with Kris. And that's where Kasey started to say, "Hey, I'm old. Like, I can't quite train like Kris does," because my load for Kris had to be a little more extensive, So, but Kasey hung in there, and he would always do the work, and that's probably too where some of the clubs that he trained with at the end were good for him, because they really, he was always fit. I mean, in Germany, in Spain, the fitness demands of his training was really quite high. And so as he got older, that was a pretty healthy response. And then going to the Sounders with Tom, they'd grown up together, and, we kind of all trained. I mean, there was no arguments about how we wanted to train, when they were kids. And Tom just has grown and matured that, and has done his own thing, for all these years. So that was pretty good for Kasey too, to finish out his career there and really get what he needed, to finish. So,
yeah. That was awesome. I mean, I remember that well, obviously, being a Sounders fan, being a huge Kasey Keller fan. And one of my really cool memories from my youth soccer days, well, I think 95, 96, you and Kasey showed up to Keithley Middle School. We were training with Randy, and freaking we see this Porsche, this really nice Porsche parked in this, junior high parking lot. We're all used to, that's where we trained, and you needed some guys, and Kasey was there, and he was training. So I got to jump in that group, and we were finishing. I don't think anybody scored, honestly, at all. Like, all I remember from that session, besides being awestruck, was when we were training with you and whatever you were having us do to get these different angles on different shots. Every time I looked up, all I saw was Kasey. Like, I didn't even see the goal. Like, there was no angle. I was like, this is good. And we were good. Like, we were pretty good, youth team. And none of us, we were just coming back to the line like, what the, like, it's just going to go to him. It was just like, it doesn't matter what I do. Maybe I'll just try to kick it really hard because I can't see the goal. It was awesome. It was like a beautiful lesson to us. I think it motivated us, and we just had so much fun with it. It was so cool that you guys were there, and it was cool to be part of that. It was a really fun experience.
I remember that. But see, so you found that zonal moment, where life stops and you're living in the moment, and then you're faced with performance.
Absolutely.
There's nothing else there.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
and it was
that's it.
beautiful because, I mean, this is like talking about my soccer journey, to be here even talking to you. Like, you know, you trained a lot of my friends, you know, Willie Lista, you know, Mason Bowman, you know, all these guys that I played with. And, you know, so you were kind of legendary to us in that way, but it was cool that we had you guys to, you know, like you said, like you guys always showed up. Like, you're part of this coaching core from my generation and my area, that you guys were always there. You know, it was very reliable to know you guys were there, whether you were doing your academy or something, or whether, you know, any of those guys. You guys just, whenever we showed up and played, you guys were always there, and it was awesome. And that kind of pushed us forward, and is probably, that's obviously a big part of the reason why we coach, you know, is the experiences we had through people like you, you know, so thank you for that.
Well, hey, I mean, that's what it's about. You know, I mean, that is what it is about right there in a nutshell. I mean, if you're willing to, you know, hang on and go for the ride, it's there for you. And that's the way it should be. That's really good.
Well, cool. Well, Rob, thank you so much for being part of our podcast.
Thank you very much.
We really appreciate you being here. And, you know, hopefully in the future too, you can join us, like we can talk, and who knows where we're going to take this thing. You know, maybe there will be some current events too that we should look at from just the goalkeeping perspective, and look at some of these videos and break some things down, because part of our mission here too is to help other kids and players coming up to start to see the game from these different angles, you know, and anything we can do to kind of inspire somebody or spark.
No, I think that's a great idea. That's a great idea. I've you know, I didn't really know what to expect, because to be honest with you, if I get too introspective about why I do stuff, you know, I mean, it's like, wow. So I appreciate the trip down memory lane, and you know, it's been good. Now I'm going to go across the street and listen to somebody really smart, and see what else I can pick up. So
awesome.
That's my attitude. So let me know when this drops. I'd love to have a look.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we will very much. All right, man. We'll enjoy the convention.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Rob.
and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, Kris, Jason, all the best.
Big thanks,
Take
Rob.
care, guys.
Take care.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Bye-bye.
New Year. Thanks to Rob Walker, our guest. Also, big thanks to your host, Jason Sisneros. I'm your co-host, Kris Hall. Shout out to our sponsors, Rising Star Academy, Maverick Goalkeeper Academy, and be who you are and be it well.
Thank you for watching Taking Your Shot, the pathway to soccer success.